No, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show.
Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Dramatic scenes in a North London street as police move in to arrest members of an organised crime gang. Inside their vehicle, evidence of a multi-million-pound trade in phone theft. A large number of stolen smartphones are discovered, all wrapped in tinfoil to block any phone signal and prevent their owners tracing them. After a year-long investigation, Scotland Yard says it has now dismantled the criminal operation that they believe is responsible for smuggling more than 40,000 stolen smartphones over to China. Officers have now recovered thousands of stolen smartphones as their investigation continues. Many of the handsets stolen in street robberies end up in shops like this. Officers recovered multiple stolen phones and arrested 2 men on suspicion of money laundering after finding £40,000 in cash.
So my warning to people that are involved in this criminal enterprise, whether it be shop workers, the shopkeepers, or even the faceless enterprise businessmen who own multiple different venues, is that you may have felt like you were acting with impunity and that we weren't coming after you and we couldn't come after you, and that actually the crime pays. So if eventually we do come, then that's just a business loss. Is that we are coming after you, we are going to come and conduct warrants, not just in your business premises, but we will target you at home, we'll target you in your cars. Nowhere is safe to conduct criminal enterprise.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain was once the envy of the world. But look around. A nation that no longer knows what it is or where it's going. A country that's broken. How do we fix Britain? How do we bring it back? Friday night with Matt Goodwin at 8 p.m. only on GB News.
Welcome to the Camilla Tominey Show. Now we start with some breaking news. The Epping migrant who was released in error from HMP Chelmsford on Friday has been arrested. Hadoush Kabatu was arrested by Met police officers in the Finsbury Park area of North London at around 8:30 a.m. That's around an hour ago this morning. Commander James Conway, who was overseeing the operation to find Kabatu, said this: "This has been a diligent and fast-paced investigation led by specialist officers from the Metropolitan Police, supported by Essex Police and the British Transport Police. Information from the public led to officers into Finsbury Park this morning, and following a research, they located Mr Kabatu. He was detained by police but will be returned to the custody of the prison service. I'm extremely grateful," he says, "to the public for their support following our appeal, which assisted in locating Mr Kabatu." Now, GB News national reporter Will Godley joined us now live from New Scotland Yard in London. Will, what's the latest?
Well, Chris, yeah, James Conway, the commander there at the Met Police, who gave that update that Hadoush Kabatu has been arrested this morning, was the one who gave the appeal to the public to help officers in their inquiry yesterday, appearing on GB News and other channels as well, appealing for not only Kabatu to hand himself in, but any members of the public who might have seen him to get in touch with them by calling 999. And it seems in this statement, he thanked members of the public who alerted the police to his presence in Finsbury Park this morning. That led to Kabatu's arrest there. Finsbury Park, of course, some 2.5 miles away from Dalston in Hackney, where Kabatu was last seen on Friday evening, just before 8 o'clock. He was seen there in his prison tracksuit, a grey tracksuit and an avocado tote bag. He must have we understand, over the last 36 hours since he was seen there, travelled then to Finsbury Park. Whether he was staying there or not, we don't know, but it's been very cold these last 2 nights in London, so you would have thought he would have been staying somewhere to keep warm. The police said yesterday, James Conway said, they believed he had access to funds. They also said that they had followed him on CCTV, taking a number of different train journeys throughout London. Of course, he boarded a train at 12:42 in Chelmsford after being released in error on Friday, and he got off it at 12 minutes past 1 in Stratford. Those 5 hours between getting off the train in Stratford and being seen in Dalston, we're not sure what he was up to, presumably travelling there, getting a tote bag and maybe doing some inquiries. We saw him at a library, potentially looking on computers, on the internet, maybe to see where he could get accommodation, look and see what he was supposed to do, because we heard from an eyewitness who's been speaking to reporters, who was outside the prison when Kobatu was released on Friday morning, who described him as being very confused. He said that he saw Mr. Kobatu try to get back into the prison 4 or 5 times, saying he was meant to be deported, not released, but prison officers said, no, you're released, and they directed him to the train station. Well, now 45 hours after this manhunt from British Transport Police, Essex Police and the Met Police, he has been arrested in Finsbury Park in North London. And James Conway, the commander overseeing this operation, thanked members of the public who led the police to Finsbury Park and led the police to arresting and detaining Hadush Kobatu. They said they're going to be returning him to the custody of the prison service. Of course, they're the ones who wrongly released him in error. Someone in the prison service has been removed from duties, as we understand that they released Hadush Kobatu on licence as opposed to handing him over to Home Office deportation officers, who would have then taken him to the airport to get on a flight to go back to Ethiopia. But David Lammy has launched a full independent investigation to establish exactly how he was even on the streets in the first place. Of course, serving 12 months in HMP Chelmsford after sexually assaulting a 14-year-old girl and a woman in Epping just 9 days after arriving here in the UK on small boats. So this news this morning that just over an hour ago he has been detained by police officers, back in police custody, and will be in prison very, very shortly, will come as a great relief to members of the public to know that he is back behind bars, Chris.
That's right, Will Godley. A huge relief. Do we know anything yet about the story? Where was he? Who called the police? Did they detain him? Were the public involved in trying to make sure and watching where he went? Do you know anything further? What happened in Finsbury Park this morning?
So far, all we're hearing from the police is that they've thanked members of the public who alerted them to Kobatu's presence in the area. Of course, the police gave an appeal yesterday to ask anyone with any help, and this has been a very high-profile case. Of course, top story on every newspaper, on every television news channel, on radio shows as well. Very hard for members of the public to miss the fact that this man is on the loose, and CCTV photographs and images of him will have been there. So we understand that someone who must have seen him in Finsbury Park this morning alerted the police, phoned 999, telling him they think they've seen him there. Of course, we don't know where he would have been staying, but outside Finsbury Park station, there's a huge number of tents of homeless people who stay in Finsbury Park outside the station. It's known for having lots of people who don't have any fixed abodes staying there, despite the fact it's very, very cold this morning and has been overnight. We don't know where Kobatu would have been staying or if he was indeed out on the streets, but someone, according to the police's statement this morning, has alerted them to his presence there, and that's what led them to arresting him at 8:30 this morning.
Will Godley, thank you so much. Now, I think we can now go to a retired Scotland Yard detective, Hamish Brown, who joins me with this breaking news. Hamish Brown, this is a huge relief for the police and the prison service. It's been deeply embarrassing this man was ever allowed to be released.
Yes, and can I add just one more to your list? And I think that's the victim and the victim's family. And this will be very concerning that this person was at large. I personally think they were perfectly safe, and I hope the police have been in contact with them to say, look, you'll be okay, but if you need an alarm, if you need a call, just do that. So, yeah, the person's been found. I'm a little surprised it wasn't even quicker, but well done for members of the public who ran in, and well done for the media, actually, for the coverage, which caused this to be solved pretty quickly. But to come to your question, yes, I mean, it's a huge embarrassment. The Prison Officers Association, I don't speak for them, but I'm surprised we haven't heard from them, because they may well be quick to say, yeah, they'll defend their member, but they will also say we're under enormous pressure. And this isn't the first time it's happened. Apparently, a couple hundred have gone in the last year, have been released by mistake. And it's the pressures on the system. Is it untrained staff? The retention rate in the prison service is awful. So you're not keeping good, experienced officers. And that's when mistakes happen. So, yeah, a lot of thinking to do. But this just shouldn't have happened. And even when he was being released, he was sort of saying, look, you've got to send me to some detention centre or something.
Well,
and they were sort of almost forcing one to train, you know.
Yes,
so there's a complete lack of communication.
It does seem that way, and according to the eyewitness quoted yesterday, he was asking, what shall I do? I don't want to, where am I going next, for about an hour outside the prison, and then was told to go to the station, which he did. I mean, it just seems completely bizarre what happened here. Now, what we know so far from the police is information from the public led officers to Finsbury Park following a search. They located Mr. Gabatu. As a senior former policeman, what do you think happened here? We're trying to get more of the information about how this happened. Of course, he was detained by police and now has been returned to the custody of the police service. What may have happened here? The public, of course, are very vigilant. Nowadays in social media, this individual's face is all over the people's mobile phones and the like. I guess the public were a key part of this.
Well, yes, the public are absolutely essential, actually. So, again, well done to the member of the public, and I reiterate to the media as well. But what will happen next is I think the police will be very happy to just get a van and take him back up to Chelmsford Prison. Technically, it should be the prison pick him up, but I think the sooner he's back there, the quicker. So we're back to square one. I doubt he will face any prosecution himself, that this was a mistake on behalf of the prison service. He didn't escape as such. If people were harbouring him, however, and they knew he was in effect an escapee, although that might seem a little harsh description, they'll be in some trouble themselves, I can assure you of that. But he had to put his head down somewhere. I mean, the nights are drawing in, it's getting very cold and wet, so he had to go somewhere. So people are looking after him. They've got some answering to do. But the essential thing is to get him back to square one. He's going to be deported soon. Good. And then we can all move in. I don't like this lessons learnt type of thing, but this is going to be a dreadful shock to the prison service. And indeed, the public have to be appeased that dangerous criminals, particularly those convicted of sexual offences, aren't wrongly released from prison.
Yes.
That is utterly absurd.
Well, Hamish Brown, will come to the political fallout, and that will be great from this, let me tell you, through this programme. But just on the issue here of what's happening with the police, Commander James Conway, he thanked, didn't he, Essex Police, the Met Police, the British Transport Police. What have these officers been doing in the past 48 hours? What's been going on behind the scenes to get to the point when they can arrest this man?
Well, they'll be looking, did he have any connections? It was interesting. He got off the train at Stratford. He didn't stay on the train to Liverpool Street, which would have been my guess, actually, because I was on an earlier programme on this channel said, well, the City of London police will be watching him at Liverpool Street. That didn't materialise. So why Stratford? Did he have connections there? And the police would have been looking for that. He ended up in Dalston Way, not that far from Stratford, so that there was some sort of key there. So the police will be looking at that. They'll be looking at CCTV, possibly those informants, people like that. But at the end of the day, you know, you can have all these fancy arrangements, but it's Joe Public that helps, and it is absolutely essential that the public remain vigilant. And when we look about all the crimes that have been solved, the majority of them is the public coming forward with suspicious behaviour and just being alert. So yes, the police would have been on their toes, but they will rely wholeheartedly on the public support.
I think it's a bit of relief for everybody this man has been arrested, and all this coverage recently about people being spoken to about DEI or by tweets and the like. This is exactly what we think the police should be doing, which is tracking down someone who has been released wrongly from a jail in Essex. It's almost a reminder that we have got a great police force, but when they're directed to things which many people feel should be the priority.
Oh, I wholeheartedly agree. The police, not through the fault of the Bobby on the beat, I might add, but they seem to have lost their way a little bit and been drawn onto things which have both irritated the public they are dealing with and both irritated the public they are not dealing with. Antisocial behaviour, shoplifting, those things that really get to people. Things down your high street, things down your town, and it looks like that the police haven't been concentrating on that. When's the last time anyone saw a Bobby on the beat? And in fact, I live in a small little town in Sussex, and there were two police officers suddenly appeared, and people were taking pictures of them. Can you believe that? Because this was just such a rare event.
I know.
And everyone, including myself, was saying how lovely to see you here. They might have been there for another matter, admittedly, but I'm sure the police appreciate this, but you must prioritise what is important, and the confidence of the public, as shown here, incidentally, as demonstrated here, is absolutely essential. Get the public back on side. Let the public have confidence you're doing good work. And they are. I know someone's been wrongly released from prison, but the prisons are full, the Crown Courts, the Magistrates' Courts are full. So, I mean, the police are arresting people, they are investigating crime, but it's the PR which goes with it, and the public confidence, which I regret is pretty low at the moment, which is unfair on the hard-working boys and all the boys and girls out there.
Well, absolutely. Listen, Hamish Brown, retired Scotland Yard Detective Inspector, thank you for joining us today on the Camilla Tominey Show. With me now in the studio in Westminster is the Chief Political Correspondent at The Times, Aubrey Allegretti. Aubrey, the political fallout is just starting from this, but let's look at some figures here. 262 prisoners in England and Wales mistakenly released by this government in a year to March 2025. That's a 126% increase on those released in error. This guy who's now been lifted, Hadesh Kibatu, is just one, of course, a high-profile prisoner because of the Epping, the Bell Hotel and the protest there and what he was convicted for. But what is going on here? I mean, why can't they control the prison population properly?
Certainly. I mean, ministers might try to just suggest that this is an isolated case, albeit a very high-profile one, but the figures you've just cited show that there is a much bigger problem. And actually, when you break those down, I mean, it's about 220 of those mistaken releases are from prisons. Around 30 of them are from the courts, so people are sort of walking free from the dock. And actually, there have been some issues identified at the prison itself. There was a report conducted by the Inspectorate last year, which found that safety, respect and preparation for release were judged to be not sufficiently good. So there have been issues with this particular service. The Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, obviously did have experience as the Justice Secretary, so she can claim that she understands the issue and that she can come into office as Home Secretary and start to sort of grip it from her side. But I think Labour is discovering that the prison service is one of those which is just creaking under the weight of, inadequacy.
It's worth pointing out, these releases happened on her watch. She was the Justice Secretary Secretary. She's widely praised as someone who can get a grip of the Home Office. Well, she wasn't, was she, when she was the Justice Secretary on this area?
Absolutely, and obviously the government announced their early release system, which was designed to free up capacity so that you didn't have a situation where effectively police couldn't arrest people because there was nowhere for them to go once they were charged and then prosecuted. So the government's tried to sort of find the right middle ground here by trying to release people slightly earlier than planned, but in doing so, it's created this situation where it feels like there's too much chaos in the prison system. And again, I'm sure we'll hear from Wes Streeting.
Well, we are about to hear from him. I mean, just finally on this, though. The Sun broke the news on Friday night, the Sun newspaper, and then we saw, didn't we, clips yesterday of interviews with an eyewitness saying this guy, Hadish Kabatu, was just simply told to go to the station, and he tried not to go anywhere for about an hour and a half, according to the eyewitness, went to the station, got on the train like he was told to do. I mean, he's hardly on the run. Well, he's on the run, but he's almost confused about where he's meant to go next. I mean, I weirdly, you think, well, what was he expected to do? He's done what he was told to do.
Yeah. I mean, you look at previous manhunts. I mean, this is not a man who seemingly has sought to disguise himself in any way. He's still wearing the same outfit that he's been wearing for basically 48 hours, 36 hours. And he seems to have been sort of parading around a town centre quite happily, being filmed, asking to sort of for help.
No, unbelievable. Anyway, listen, thank you all, Greta. Stay with us, of course. With me now, live, is the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting. Wes Streeting, thank you for joining us today on the Camilla Tominey Show. Your reaction to the fact that this individual has been captured by police?
Well, what a relief. And I just want to say a massive thank you to members of the public whose vigilance provided the police with vital intelligence that allowed him to be tracked down to Newbury Park, where he's been arrested and detained and will now be deported. But as you've just been discussing, this is an unbelievable turn of events and should never have happened. And many of us are asking ourselves this morning, how on earth could someone who has been convicted of a serious crime, who was due for deportation, instead be released onto our streets? The Justice Secretary has ordered an investigation into this. That will look at what went wrong, how on earth this could have happened, and who was responsible and what we're going to do about it. And we will obviously be transparent and upfront with Parliament and with the public about all of those things, because I think the whole country has been shocked, frankly, that this could have happened. So we will get to the bottom of it, and there will be accountability.
Absolutely. Well, absolutely, and there must be accountability. Just on this issue, do you know what happened this morning? Is anyone telling you what happened within the government? Obviously, he was detained at 8:30 a.m. Do you know what role the members of the public had? Would you like to say thank you to them, and would you like to apologise, frankly, to the victims of this man?
Yeah, so all I know is what I've said already, which is the police were able to track him down to Finsbury Park. That was thanks to vital intelligence that came from vigilant members of the public. So I do want to say on behalf of the government an enormous thank you. I am appalled that this man was released. He should never have been on our streets. We will get to the bottom of what went wrong, and we will make sure there is accountability and transparency with the public. Because the problem is when things like this happen, and I'm afraid I do not accept that these things just happen. I know that this has been a problem for many years. It's a problem under the previous government as well, where we had high-profile and in some cases less high-profile cases of prisoners being wrongfully released. But these things should not happen. So we will be getting to the bottom of what went wrong in this case, as well as doing everything we can to make sure that in future we do not see people on our streets who should not be there.
But on the issue of releasing individuals early, it really is a Labour problem, isn't it? Numbers up 128%. 262 prisoners are released early, mistakenly released in England and Wales. It really is on Labour's watch. You can blame the Tories for a lot of things, let me tell you, but on this one, it's down to you. The buck stops with, frankly, Shabana Mahmood as Justice Secretary and now David Lammy.
Well, it is certainly our responsibility to clean up this mess, because that is the mandate that we were given by the country at the last general election. This has been a problem for some years. This is a problem that has plagued the previous government and now this government. We will make sure that we sort this out. I mean, we inherited a prison system in an absolutely dire state. I say that by way of context, but not by way of excuse, because even taking into account the creaking prison system that we inherited and the fact that prisons were literally full to bursting when we came into office, that still does not explain or excuse how people have been released onto our streets who should not be there. And we've got a problem with the sort of culture that just says, oh, these things happen. And I see this reflected right across the public sector. It's why I'm taking such a tough stance on maternity, because I do not accept when you see the numbers of babies dying and the number of women dying in childbirth, that these things just happen. I think there are all sorts of things in our country that over time and over years have just been accepted as business as usual, and we cannot do that. And I think the message that the voters have sent us, particularly in the Caerphilly by-election on Thursday, which was an extraordinarily bad result for Labour, the message that the country is sending us is they elected us to deliver change, and they want to feel that change. They want to see and experience that change. And so we have got to be bolder, and we've got to go hard at the modernisation and reform of the public sector. We cannot tolerate this kind of failure. And let me tell you, the Prime Minister will not tolerate this kind of failure. And I know I speak for the Prime Minister, the Home Secretary and the Justice Secretary when I convey the anger that I feel and they feel about the fact that this dangerous offender was on our streets rather than on a plane.
The problem is, Wes Streeton, that even when the PM is angry, nothing seems to change. He was angry a week last Friday about this individual, these Maccabi Tel Aviv football fans couldn't come to Villa Park. They're now not going to come. You've seen record channel crossings this week, passing the figure from all of 2024. You've got a hokey-cokey migrant, one in, one out, one in again. He's still here. The rape gang inquiry on the brink of collapse. You've been wiped out in Caerphilly, a seat where you've represented for over a century. What is going on? Is governing, frankly, too much for the Labour Party?
No, I do think that, when we came in, right across the board, right across all of our public services, and also, frankly, in the economy as well, we inherited a country that was in a state, and there are still big challenges, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise, and I'm not going to pretend that the list of things you just reeled off are not real, serious challenges where we have got to raise our game and go harder and faster at turning things around. There have been some green shoots of recovery in our country since we came in. Interest rates, for example, have fallen 5 times, and wages have been rising faster than living costs for the first time in years. We're finally getting NHS waiting lists down, turning the tide after years and years of waiting lists going up. So there have been significant achievements under our belt, but as I say, there is no room for complacency. There are still big challenges, and we've heard the message from the voters. And the worst thing we could do after Caerphilly, which you mentioned just there, is pretend the voters were sending us a different message, or pretend that the anger that exists about the failure of public services and some of the examples of state failure don't exist. We've got to take that on the chin, take it to heart, and in the same way that Keir Starmer took the Labour Party almost by the scruff of its neck to reform it and modernise it and make sure it was electable at the last election, we've now got to do the same thing to the state, and that is exactly what we will do.
Look, Wes Streeton, your honesty is to be welcomed, frankly. It is to be welcomed. But I think voters, GBNews viewers and listeners, they simply want your government to get a grip. And it's not happening. You appear to be passengers in office, not saying you personally, but there's a sense that you're just drifting along and nothing, the change you promised last July is not happening. When will you get a grip?
Well, all I'd say to your viewers this morning is that we've got the message, and we know that it will be actions that you will judge us by, not by words. So I'm not just going to reel off a whole list of promises this morning, because I know it's the improvements that people want to see. All I would say is that there are grounds for some confidence and optimism. If you take the NHS, for example, we told you before the election we'd deliver 2 million more appointments in our first year. We've delivered over 5 million. We said we'd recruit 1,000 more GPs in our first year. We've recruited 2,500. And those are examples of some of the green shoots of recovery. I would be the first to admit, though, there are still enormous challenges in the NHS. So I want people to know we're not complacent. We know there is a lot more to do, and we know that the public are expecting us to raise our game, and that we'll take that feedback on the chin, and we will show through our actions, not our words, that we are repaying the trust that people put in us at the last election.
Look, Wes Streeton, you are treating more people who need treated, and that is your basic job as Health Secretary. That is a very good thing. But you have also given a big pay rise rise to junior doctors, 29% over 3 years. You said last year that would end strikes. They're happening again next month. They've come back for more, as many forecasts would happen. Will you hold the line, or will it just get worse because they want more money, these resident doctors?
No, I am holding the line, Chris, and I think many of your viewers will agree that a 28.9% pay rise, the highest in the entire public sector, was real progress for those resident doctors on pay, and people will understand why at this stage I can't afford to go further at this time. And what really frustrates me about this impending strike action is that I've put on the table the offer of a deal on training places and jobs that these doctors are crying out for, not in the future, but I can do that right now. And I can also take action on things like some of the exam fees and course costs that resident doctors face. But I won't be able to afford to do that if I'm instead spending £250 million on meeting the cost of these strikes. So where we are at the moment will be a lose-lose situation where they set back the NHS, disrupt patients' treatment, put pressure on other NHS staff, and also shoot themselves in the foot because I won't be able to do the things that I want to do for them on jobs and training places. If they get round the table, call off these strikes and work with us, we can deliver those training places for people who are applying for them right now. That is the opportunity available. But Chris, I'm not going to be held to ransom. We are not a pushover. And the message to resident doctors is you can work with us and everyone wins, or you can go on strike and everyone loses. But there is not a more pro-health secretary, pro-NHS health secretary waiting in the wings.
No.
We know that Reform wants to replace the NHS with an insurance-style system. That's the choice facing the country at the next general election. And resident doctors might just want to work with a health secretary that wants to work with them, rather than be lumbered with a Reform government that wants to dismantle the NHS. The choice is theirs.
Can I ask you quickly about the budget? There's a report today you're going to whack the wealthiest with big taxes, but isn't the truth you'll need to break your pledge from last July to increase income tax, national insurance for employees, or VAT? Something's got to give to pay for the priorities that you've got, given the sluggish productivity that the OBR have found in the economy.
Well, I've seen all the wild speculation about the budget. I think I'm not going to speculate. I'm going to wait for the Chancellor to set out a budget. People can see the public's finances are in a challenging state. So's the economy, but also so's family finances, so are business finances. We recognise that. We've got to get our economy growing again. There have been some encouraging signs in terms of interest rates, and the UK projected to be the fastest growing economy in the G7. Those are all things that are cause for encouragement, but we're not out of the woods yet. The Chancellor's got a challenging job. She's got lots of considerations to balance, and she will set out her choices at the budget and not before.
Look, Wes Streeting, we've taken you for long enough. Thank you so much for joining us live on the Camilla Tominey Show. We really appreciate it. Thank you. See you again soon. Now, let's get latest on the update of the breaking news. The Epping migrant who was released in error from HMP Chelmsford on Friday morning has now been arrested. Hadashu Kabatu was arrested by Met officers in the Finsbury Park area of North London at around 8:30 a.m, so about an hour and a half ago. Let's go back now to New Scotland Yard, where our national reporter Will Godley has the latest. Will, over to you.
Yeah, Chris, it was Finsbury Park where the Met descended on this morning after a tip-off from a member of the public who spotted Hadush Kabatu, called 999, alerted them to his presence there, and that is where he was arrested. But of course, it was 36 hours or so that the police weren't sure about his whereabouts. They said yesterday evening his last known sighting was in Hackney on Friday evening, just before 8 o'clock this morning. So it will come as a huge relief that this man has been apprehended and will be handed back over to the prison service, where he will be detained awaiting his deportation. And the Commander, James Conway, who's overseen this manhunt at the Met Police, reacting to the news that Hadush Kabatu has been arrested, said this has been a diligent and fast-paced investigation led by specialist officers of the Met Police, Essex Police and British Transport Police. He said he thanked members of the public who helped them arrest Mr Kabatu and lead them to his location this morning. Wes Streeting on GB News just now, reacting to this news, said this should have never have happened. He was appalled, and he was talking about that investigation launched by David Lammy, who Wes Streeting says he hopes will get to the bottom of exactly what went wrong here. Of course, we know that Kabatu was released in error on Friday morning. An eyewitness describes seeing him leave the prison at about 10:10, where he loitered around the prison for about an hour and a half, not knowing what to do, according to this eyewitness, who described him going back to the prison about 5 times, telling prison guards, "I'm not supposed to be released, I'm supposed to be deported." Prison staff, though, according to this eyewitness, told Kabatu that no, he was supposed to be released, and assisted him with directions back to Chelmsford train station, where we know he got a train from Chelmsford to Stratford in East London, where he got into East London at about 12 minutes past 1 on Friday. There was then about a 5-hour gap before he was seen in Dalston Library in East London. We're not sure what he was doing there, but in the CCTV footage we've seen of him, he doesn't seem to have a mobile phone, so potentially getting on the internet, getting on the computers, seeing what he's supposed to do. As far as we can tell, eyewitnesses describe him as being very, very confused, not knowing why he was released, of course, in error. Well, an investigation will take place to try and establish exactly why he was released. Wes Streeting telling us he's appalled that he was on the street, but relieved that he had been found after 45 hours. He thanked the Met Police for working on this manhunt, but also members of the public who, what he described as gave vital information to the Metropolitan Police that led to this arrest. And Wes Streeting told us he will be deported. We don't know when that will be, though. Wes Streeting also said that the investigation will be transparent with the public and ensure that these things won't happen in the future as they seek to stop this. And we've also had reaction from the Liberal Democrat MP for Chelmsford, Marie Goldman, who said she's relieved that Hadush Kabatu is back in custody, but she said he must now be deported, Chris.
Well, Will Godley, thank you for your reporting now live from Scotland Yard, and please bring us latest update whenever you get it. Now, joining me now is the Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp. Chris Philp, thank you for joining us on Camilla Tominey on GB News. Your reaction, please, to the fact this man has been detained.
Good morning. Well, look, it's good that he has been finally caught, but I remain shocked that this inept Labour government let him out in the first place. They should never have allowed his release, and I think David Lammy and Shabana Mahmood have questions to answer because they have presided over this system. It should obviously be now properly investigated. What should happen now to this man is that he should be immediately deported. He is quite clearly a risk to women and girls. Just 8 days after illegally crossing the Channel, he sexually assaulted a 14-year-old girl in Essex, and we don't want people in this country who are going to attack women and girls in that way, so he should be immediately deported. It does raise a wider question. He crossed the Channel by small boat, committed this sexual assault within 8 days. In my view, everybody who illegally enters the country should be deported within a week. To do that, we need to leave the ECHR. That is now the Conservative policy. And if illegal immigrants who cross the Channel are removed within a week, either back to their country of origin or a safe third country, that will mean people like this man do not pose a risk to women and girls here. It will also mean the crossings are deterred, and pretty quickly they will stop entirely.
Wider issue of small boats crossing, Chris Philp. On this issue, should there be a statement in the House of Commons tomorrow from David Lammy to say exactly what happened, exactly what went wrong, and frankly, our heads rolling in the prison service, because this has been a complete disgrace and an embarrassment to this country?
Well, it certainly has been a complete disgrace, and yes, David Lammy should absolutely, and Shabana Mahmood should absolutely be giving an account for themselves in Parliament. They're responsible for running this system. Clearly, somehow there was a huge mistake, terrible mistake, between the prison service and immigration enforcement, who should have been picking this man up and taking him into immigration detention for deportation. So between the two of those departments, they messed up spectacularly. Ministers need to apologise, which I don't think they've done so far. They need to come to Parliament to account for their failures, and there needs to be an investigation to determine exactly what went wrong.
Figures show that 262 prisoners in England and Wales were mistakenly released, Chris Philp, in a year to March 2025. Some of that period, of course, you were in power as a Tory government. Labour blames, of course, the early release scheme they started last September by Shabana Mahmood as the Justice Secretary, blamed that on your government for failing to build enough prison spaces, prison cells. Is this, you are to blame for some of this that's caused the chaos in the prison system? You can't blame it all on Labour, can you?
Well, look, they've been in charge for a year and a half now, so they need to take responsibility for what they are presiding over. I mean, we did have record ever police numbers at the point we left office. There were thousands of extra prison places under construction. There is no question we do need more prison places to make sure people who commit crimes get put in prison so the public can be protected. But Labour have been in charge now for quite a while, and it's up to them to take responsibility for what's now happening.
In the papers that even Labour are starting to regret dropping your Rwanda plan last year. Is it time this government brought that in, or some form of outsourcing of processing to countries in the Western Balkans, for example? All sorts of ideas are happening, but clearly it's not working. Even that individual who the hokey-cokey migrant he's called, who was sent out, one in, one out, one in again into this country, that isn't working either.
Yes, they should definitely bring back Rwanda. That is a scheme that would have meant everyone illegally crossing the channel would have been rapidly removed to Rwanda. That would have had a deterrent effect, because why would people bother crossing from France to the UK if they would wind up in Rwanda? Labour made a huge mistake by cancelling that before it even started. They had this, we're going to smash the gangs gimmick. Well, that didn't work. Now they're saying they're going to send a tiny handful of people back to France. I think they've so far sent 42 people to France. That's all. Over a time when 16,000 have arrived. Now, clearly, if you've got like a 0.1% chance of getting sent back to France and a 99.9% chance of staying in the UK, that's going to be no deterrent whatsoever. Look, the Conservatives have a clear plan. We're going to come out of the ECHR, the European Convention on Human Rights, and that will enable us to deport every illegal arrival within a week of arriving, either back to their home country or back to a safe third country like Rwanda if we can't remove them back to their home country. And that will pretty quickly stop people crossing, because why would you cross if you're going to get immediately removed? The USA has done something very similar this year, which has worked. And I think about 12 or 13 years ago, Australia did something similar as well. We know it works, but Labour is too weak to do it, to be honest.
Thank you, Chris Philp. Can I reflect briefly on the Caerphilly by-election? Do you know who your Welsh leader is in Wales?
Well, we have obviously fought that by-election hard. Disappointing result for the main parties. Plaid Cymru obviously won that, and Reform did pretty well. We had a disappointing night because, look, I think we're still in a process of recovery and of renewal, and we're going to keep working hard at that up and down the country. I think our party conference a couple of weeks ago was a bit of a turning point, because we did lay out, I think it was 37 new policies, including the policy to come out of the ECHR, and as I mentioned a second ago, deport every illegal arrival within a week of their feet touching the ground.
Sorry, I don't mean to be rude.
Stamp duty to save £47 billion.
You can't say that it's a turning point when your vote collapsed to 2% in a by-election on Friday. It's not a turning point. It's a complete disaster. You're almost irrelevant to the wider public, certainly in that seat in Wales. Can I ask you again, who is your leader in Wales?
I mean, look. In that seat. The Conservatives have never won that seat. When it was last contested, we got, to be honest, a pretty low share of the vote. That's not an area we've ever been competitive. But there are plenty of other parts of the country where we are competitive. And I do think, just to come back to what I said a second ago, look, I mean, we had a whole load of new policies. Let me just finish. We had a whole load of new policies at our party conference a couple of weeks ago. I know that hasn't yet translated into the opinion polls, but I think it is a turning point because we now have a very positive agenda with a comprehensive plan. We're the only party, including Reform, we're the only party to have a comprehensive plan to fix illegal migration. We had like a 20-page document on fixing illegal migration, a couple of points I've mentioned already, a plan to save £47 billion of public spending, half of which roughly from welfare, which we can then reinvest in abolishing stamp duty completely for primary residences, hiring 10,000 extra police officers to have surge policing in crime hotspots. We're going to double the budget for immigration enforcement so we can remove 150,000 people a year with no right to be here. That is a positive programme that I think we can now take to the country.
And you had 14 years and didn't do it. I've got to ask you again, who is the leader of the Welsh Tories in Wales?
But we've now got
I've asked you 3 times.
A new leader. We're under new leadership. Camilla Badenoch. We're under new leadership.
Yeah, you know her name, right? So who's the leader in Wales?
Previously, Camilla Badenoch was never Prime Minister.
You don't know.
I
You can
was never
say.
Home Secretary. We now have a new programme to take to the country, and I'm optimistic and positive about the future.
If you don't know, you can say, who is the leader of the Welsh Tories?
Look, I've been explaining our positive programme for the future, which we set out at our party conference. 37 new policies we have.
I know,
37
I'm counting.
new policies we set out.
I'll just ask you a fifth time, who is the leader of the Welsh Conservatives?
Look, I've explained that we've got a positive new programme.
If you don't know, you can say. It's totally fine.
In the months and years ahead.
The sixth one.
We've got a relatively new leader, and I'm afraid the name escapes me.
I know, he's called Darren Miller, and that does matter because the party is disappearing rapidly into the sand of a Welsh beach. When will you start governing for the whole country? You're going back into your heartlands of England. Wales has now lost you, it seems, and next May's elections will be a disaster.
No, I don't think that's true at all. We are governing for the whole country. I mean, the plans, I've mentioned some of the plans we set out at our party conference a couple of months ago, and those are plans for the whole country, like saving money from welfare, cutting stamp duty, ending illegal immigration, recruiting more police officers. By the way, that 10,000 extra police officer pledge applies in Wales as well as in England. So those are all policies that are for the entire country. They'll benefit all of our United Kingdom, things like the reduction in welfare spending, for example, controlling illegal immigration. Those are policies for the whole United Kingdom. And we are going to be fighting everywhere. Look, it's tougher in some places than others, obviously, but we are going to be fighting everywhere.
I'll just find on a really serious issue, Jess Phillips is still there as safeguarding minister. Some critics say you're making political capital out of the suffering of these poor victims of the grooming gangs. 5 or so don't want to be there. Apparently 5 do want her to be there in charge of that. I mean, do you still think she should go? Is that the answer? Or surely, just frankly, all parties should get behind these victims and deliver justice for them?
Well, we are supporting those 5 survivors who have lost confidence in Jess Phillips. They say they will only return to the survivors consultation panel if Jess Phillips resigns as the minister responsible. She has lost their confidence, and we are supporting those survivors in what they've said. Labour never wanted this inquiry into the rape gang scandal in the first place. When we first raised it, when Kemi and I first raised it back in January, Keir Starmer smeared us as jumping on a far-right bandwagon. That was a disgraceful thing of Keir Starmer to say. It was only when faced with a vote in Parliament, I think it was in June of this year, they finally capitulated, and here they are several months later, still dragging their heels and not listening to what these survivors like Fiona Goddard are saying. The government need to start listening to the survivors and regain their confidence. And unfortunately, the survivors have said they don't have confidence in Jess Phillips.
Look, thank you very much for your time today, Chris Philp. We do appreciate it. Thank you, sir, for joining us today on Camilla Tominey on GB News.
All right.
Joining me now is Zia Youssef, who's the head of policy at Reform UK. Zia Youssef, great to see you. I saw you, of course, on the night of the count Thursday night. You didn't win Caerphilly. You were down as favourites. What's gone wrong?
Well, it's disappointing not to win on the night, but It was a historic day for reform and for Welsh politics. There is a historic realignment going on, Chris, in Welsh politics, a historic realignment in British politics. Who would have thought that the Labour Party and the Tory Party, the two grand old parties for 100 years, between them, got 13% of the vote. Reform delivered. Again, disappointed we didn't win, but we got almost 3 times as many votes as the Tories and Labour combined. As you just said, the Tories down to 2%. They are irrelevant in Wales, just as they're irrelevant in the rest of the country. Labour down to 11 points. And look, it is clear now that ahead of the Senate elections next May, Wales is going to be a straight-up battle between Plaid and Reform.
I asked Chris Philp, who is the Tory leader in Wales. He couldn't say over 6 times. Who's your leader in Wales?
We don't have one yet.
Well, why is that then? That's a real important point.
Well, yeah, it is. And one of the things that we are focused on is making sure a big part of why Reform exists is we take the view that the existing calibre of personnel across both of the two old parties is not acceptable. And therefore, we are working hard to ensure we have exceptional people. We're looking for those people right now. We did have an amazing candidate, Claire Powell, who worked incredibly hard, really proud of the candidate, of the campaign he fought. I think he will be in the Senate next year. Look, tactical voting clearly had a big impact.
A progressive stitch-up, as some were saying.
Yeah, clearly, but tactical voting will not, because of the different electoral system that happens in the Senate elections in May next year, tactical voting will really not be an issue. And actually, if you had looked without the tactical voting, it would have been 3 seats each if you were to sort of an analysis of that. So look, we are very proud of what's been achieved in Wales. Remember as well, last time round, Reform won 1.7% of the vote. We got 1.7 to 36%. So the momentum is with us.
It seems that there's anger with the two main parties. Yeah, and you're benefiting, as is Plaid.
Yeah, and credit to Plaid, they're surging too, but not as much as us, right? So their vote, I think off the top of my head, is about up 18 points on last time. Ours was up 34 points. So Reform still has more momentum than any other political party in this country. I'm very confident we'll have an outstanding set of elections in Wales next year.
We haven't reached peak reform, as your rivals are always saying it's peak reform.
Well, I remember supposedly extremely smart talking heads all over the place saying, you know, when I took over as chairman, I remember we just won 14% of the vote share, and we were told, well, Nigel Farage's parties are capped at 14%, then they were capped at 20%, then they were capped at 25%, then they were capped at 30%. Now we're capped at 35%. Let's see. We're going to keep making our case to the British people. They are sick and tired of what the two old parties have done to this country, and they are looking and crying out for change.
OK, so they've finally caught this individual who was freed wrongly in Essex, Kibatu. Your reaction to that, please?
Relieved that he's been apprehended. I'm not even going to say caught, because looking at the CCTV footage and by eyewitness accounts, he wasn't even trying to evade the police. In fact, when he came out, according to an eyewitness, very credible reports in the Telegraph, he was told to leave the prison. He tried going back in on a multitude of occasions. They gave him some money and told him to go to the station. I tweeted out yesterday that Britain's descent, the British state's descent into a Monty Python sketch is pretty much complete. I will say this too. My heart goes out to the victim and to the victim's family, and how anyone who has been the victim of sexual assault in this country can have any faith in this Labour government or the apparatus of state is beyond me. Shabana Mahmood has been totally MIA. I haven't seen or heard anything from her. David Lammy went on TV and just talked about how he was livid. Look, the reality is we have got a situation in this country where this is a man who should never have been in the country. We have open borders. He turned up uninvited via small boat on our beaches. Then he committed a horrendous sexual offence, and then he was released, quote unquote, accidentally. And I'll say this too,
so why did you say on that point accidentally? Because you said that yesterday on social media, and some thought you meant that they did it on purpose. It's obviously wrong to release him. It was a mistaken release, but that accidentally fuels maybe misreporting, drives anger about. Well, obviously, everyone was crossed, but it wasn't. It was by mistake this happened, right?
I chose my language very carefully, and it is accurate language. I'm merely reflecting. The word accidentally. The word accidentally is exactly what the state is currently saying. I'll say this too. I'm not aware, Chris, that anyone who's been jailed for tweets has been accidentally released from prison. They seem to have watertight prisons for them. And secondly, here's another really important point, the total lack of accountability for civil servants. So the governor of that prison that has made this catastrophic error, one of the most hideous errors I've seen in a very long time, is refusing to engage MPs on a one-to-one basis about this issue, saying that they will not engage MPs on a one-to-one basis. When was the last time we saw a civil servant presiding over a catastrophe like this, actually face some consequences. Instead, what usually happens is they get promoted and end up in the Lords.
So what should happen? If you were in power, your party might be in power after 2029, what would you do with the issue of Chelmsford Prison? Who should be resigning? Whose head's on the block?
Hold on. Let's zoom out here. This man should never have been in the country, Chris. So the first thing is let's not treat the symptom. Let's secure our borders. Let's have Britain actually have some sovereignty. We need to do the things that the Tories did not do for 14 years. They insult the intelligence of everyone watching this programme when they talk about everything that needs to be done. They had 14 years. They didn't leave the ECHR. We need to do that. Then we need to derogate from every international treaty that would otherwise be used to frustrate deportations. We're going to do that too, including the 1951 Refugee Convention. Then we need to build enough detention capacity. We need to make sure that anybody who arrives in this country illegally, every single one without exception, is put into detention and deported. And not just them, actually. The people who are already here in this country illegally must be deported.
You're the head of policy at Reform UK. That will take years and years and years. You haven't even got a single
That doesn't mean it's not worth doing. That does not mean it's not worth doing, Chris.
In the House of Lords. I mean, how will you get through that? That programme is exciting. It's almost a silver bullet, which I say can't happen. How will you do this?
I will tell you this. In Nigel's first year, Nigel's Prime Ministership, if that is the result that the British people choose to deliver at the next general election, will be the most transformative legislative agenda, and a lot of that will happen in our first year. Mark my words, we are working on that. We know, of course, the House of Lords are going to frustrate us. It's largely a loyalty scheme.
You haven't got
it's the peers. Well, why is that? Because the House of Lords has become a loyalty scheme for donors to the Labour Party and the Tory Party and failed civil servants. The very people, by the way, who wouldn't even want to leave the ECHR.
You haven't got a shadow cabinet. You're head of policy. You've got a leader.
We will, before we go into the next...
and a deputy leader. Who can I talk to about justice and affairs and your party?
Chris, we are an insurgent start-up party. We're very proud of what we've achieved in a very short period of time. Of course, we've got work to do, and we're working really hard to do that. Prior to the next general election, again, you can hold me to this, we will put in front of the British people, Nigel will put in front of the British people, a shadow cabinet of the quality that has not been seen in this country in my lifetime.
That'll be the company bosses and others, experts in the field?
It'll be lots of different people. We've already guided around half of Nigel's cabinet. If number one, it'll be a smaller cabinet. No useful decision-making meeting has 25 people in.
So what, how big, 15, 12?
I'm not going to give you a precise number. It will be smaller than it is currently. And around half of those people we would expect to not be MPs. So some of them will be, some of them won't be. Okay. We will optimise for talent and people who have achieved great things in the real world, not people... You know, the only quality you need to be Chancellor of this country at the moment is to have carried an MP's bag around for a few years and maybe been in the complaints department at Halifax. This is a big reason why...
That's our system that we won for centuries, and you're saying it's broken.
It is absolutely broken, yeah.
Sarah Pochin, she, of course, is one of your 5 MPs. She said this, didn't she, in her phone-in yesterday: "It drives me mad when I see adverts full of black people, full of Asian people. You're an Asian man. Would she like to apologise? Should you resign?"
Of course not. Look, Sarah is a lovely person. You've taken a very specific part of what she said. She did say that, and she has apologised because that was poorly phrased.
Is that right to apologise?
The point... I think it was, yes, because it's something, it's I think, giving people an incorrect impression of what she actually meant. If you actually listen to what was said, and I encourage people to actually listen to the whole segment, there was a caller, a chap named Stuart, a gentleman called Stuart, who basically was quite upset about the total lack of representation for some groups.
Also, and the over-representation of other groups.
And over-representation of other groups, according to a Channel 4 report. And he actually talked about how this is having an impact in the real world. And no one ever talks about this, partly because people are worried about this sort of a backlash. You know, there is no group that attains that has lower attainment educationally in this country than white working class boys. No mainstream politician talks about it. 14%, just 14% of white British boys on school meals, eligible for school meals, go to university. That's lower than any other demographic group. It's a disgrace. And also, every policy response, and the Tories were as bad at this as anyone, invariably makes the situation worse, discriminates against them directly. We have internship programs. We've had internship programs in this country for the civil service, for which white people are ineligible to apply. Inside our military, the RAF lost an employment. In fact, there was an internal inquiry, if you remember, in 2021, that condemned the RAF's recruitment processes as saying they literally discriminated against people based on the colour of their skin. Reform believed that nobody should be discriminated against because of the colour of their skin. We had recently the Bank of England doing another discriminatory recruitment programme. We've had our security services routinely running recruitment programmes programmes that discriminate based on skin colour. Reforms
because
policy...
they're trying to lift representation of groups that are not hired. So do you think that shouldn't happen?
Well, the evidence is such that white working class boys are the ones being left behind more than any other group. I'm afraid no politician talks about it, in part because they worry about this backlash. And I'm telling you this, if we do not have a serious conversation about this, then I speak to not only those kids, I speak to their parents, I speak to their mums. I remember one who was in tears about the lack of opportunity for her kids. And what's the response? More discrimination against them. So, look, we've got to have a serious conversation about that.
On the grooming gangs issue, what's going on there? I mean, some are saying that, not you personally, but some critics, maybe the Tories, Reform and others, are using it as a political football when we're forgetting about the victims. All we should be caring about is getting them some justice.
Well, of course that's the case, but we need to put this whole inquiry into context. I mean, it was Keir Starmer who called the very idea of having a national inquiry as, quote, a far-right bandwagon.
But then he called one. He got the evidence from Louise Casey and then called one. He's doing the right thing, isn't he?
Well, so they've been dragged into this kicking and screaming. So he's now jumped on, quote, the far-right bandwagon himself.
Well, he said that term,
doesn't believe in anything.
He said that term, didn't he? When I was asking him questions about that in January, he called it a far-right bandwagon.
I remember. He did a great job with that, and he's been exposed as the two-faced individual that he is. This is a man who doesn't believe in anything, and that's why he's currently the least unpopular.
He would say he finds the evidence and then takes action. He wouldn't say he's two-faced.
Well, I'm sorry. The idea that new evidence has come to light since your interview, Chris, is for the birds. We've had evidence now for decades in this country of not just the hideous crimes and the perpetrators still wandering around, but also cover-ups. You know, council workers involved in the cover-up and police officers not just involved in the cover-up, but tragically and sadly, some police officers, there's some evidence that they were actually involved in the institutional rape of these children. It is appalling, it's disgusting, and the fact that you now have 5 survivors who have resigned from that inquiry, Jess Phillips's position is untenable because they have specifically cited her as one of the reasons why they're resigning. I don't see how her position is tenable.
So, Yusuf, I can take you back to our top-breaking story this hour. Justice Secretary David Lammy has said this. Hadesh Kabatu will be deported, he said. He said this. Kabatu has been arrested, is now in custody and will be deported. Thanks to the Met, Essex and British Transport Police for their swift and thorough work. I've already ordered the immediate strengthening of release checks and a full investigation into what went wrong. So I don't see an apology there, Zia Yusuf, simply that they're glad he's arrested, but no apology yet for the concern there would have been, of course, from the victims and the others too.
But why would he apologise? I mean, this Labour cabinet don't feel accountable for anything that happens in this country. I mean, how many times has Keir Starmer described as, quote, appalling actions that have happened on his watch? They refuse to take any accountability. Let's see if even this guy is going to get deported. I would not take that as a given whatsoever. I'm sure as we speak, the human rights industrial complex are mobilising to try and keep this man in the country. I'll point this out too. Keir Starmer, when he was a barrister, built a career. He built a career when he was a barrister of trying to free men exactly like this, in some cases actually men who manifold numbers of people at a time. He built a career trying to stop such deportations. So you've got to remember all of these things, that this is a Labour cabinet that, I'm afraid, do not have the interests of British people.
Well, they follow the rules, don't they? They follow the rules that have been set by repeated governments, the Human Rights Act, the Labour government.
They're following rules.
But there's a point to that, isn't there, that we live by rules. Rules is what govern us. What you're going to do is blow the whole thing up and see where the chips fall, and that's alarming.
What we're saying is that the rules that that need to exist in this country need to exist for the benefit of British people, of British citizens, not for foreign citizens. What has happened now is that actually the system of English common law that served this great country brilliantly for centuries has now collapsed in favour of the supremacy of foreign courts, foreign judges that basically now mean that British people cannot have a border, let alone a secure border, can't even have a border. I mean, this man, as we speak, there are going to be people coming across the channel illegally. Nothing is being done to stop that from happening. That is beyond unacceptable. And the learned helplessness that now exists in this country amongst the political class, they don't seem to understand that Parliament is sovereign. That Parliament is absolutely capable of saying, enough of all of this, we are going to make laws in the House of Commons and inside Parliament for the British people.
Will you get a grip? I asked earlier of West Street and the Health Secretary, why can't you just get a grip and run this country properly? Things keep going repeatedly wrong. Last week's one of the worst weeks I can remember covering politics. I've been doing it for 20 years. Why should viewers, listeners, GB News viewers and listeners believe you when you say you can do any better?
Nigel has built a career over 30 years. People know what he stands for. He's been, you can go online, go and look on YouTube. He was making videos about going out into the channel on his YouTube channel.
He's never run out of things, He's existed in opposition.
Years ago.
He existed in opposition against things. He's a campaigner. What's the evidence he can do any better?
Well, number one, he is the leader of a party that has come from absolutely nowhere to be now, I would argue, in pole position in this country. He's built an amazing organisation there. I've seen firsthand the sort of talent he's able to attract. Okay. But let's also be clear. We need talent in this country, in the political class, but we also have to have a political leader who believes that laws in this country should be made for the betterment of the lives of British citizens. And I'm afraid we have not had that for decades.
We need to get there. I mean, I think everyone will say things are not working as well as they should do. Why do you think Labour are so challenged by it?
Because the entire cabinet, these are people who have achieved absolutely nothing inside the real world. All they've ever done is be student politicians, come out, carry bags around for some MPs and be special advisors, be in opposition for 14 years.
You're a tech millionaire, extremely successful in your private life and your business, which is, of course, to be credited. But why are you good at running a country?
Well, I'm not proposing that I run the country, to be clear. But I'm proud of what I achieved in the private sector. I built a company from scratch. I sold it for a decent amount of money to an American bank. We've created hundreds of jobs, paid tens of millions of pounds in taxes. And I'll put, here's the other point, though. You look at the current Labour cabinet. What experience does Rachel Reeves have? Being someone who manages complaints at Halifax, I would not say is a good training to be a chancellor. Maybe it's good training for the complaints she has to receive now.
You do want to roll in Nigel Farage's cabinet, don't you?
Well, that'll be a decision for him to make.
Okay.
But, ultimately, the people, I will tell you this, we are speaking to exceptional people about serving in our cabinet. And one of the reasons why we need an insurgent party like Reform to do this is because the only way you actually get to become Prime Minister of this country for the two old parties is by becoming leader of that party. The only way you do that is buying off your most senior MPs with the highest officers of the land. That is not something Nigel has to do.
OK. Well, Zia Yusuf, thank you for joining us today on GBNews Live in the studio. We do appreciate it. Thank you for joining us here. Joining me now is Madeleine Sumption. She's the director of the Migration Observatory at Oxford University. Madeleine Sumption, thank you for joining us. A lot of breaking news today. Your reaction to the fact this individual has now been detained after 48 hours?
Yes, well, that was a rather astonishing episode, wasn't it? It's in some ways more of a issue of the prison service and the prison service than an immigration question per se. There's obviously lots of broader issues with the asylum system and how that's managed, but I would not really an immigration question. It's more of a criminal justice and prisons one.
Yes, exactly. But of course, it does go to the heart of the small boats crisis. Who is crossing the channel? Who is coming here? Your role is watching these numbers coming across our southern border. How many small migrants are you expecting to come this year? We've already beat the figure, haven't we, for all of last year, and it's only the third week of October.
We have, and the numbers they fluctuate up and down over time. And we were in a period where we were seeing consistent increases, really starting around October, November last year. And so it looked for a while like this could be the highest year on record. They've actually flattened out a little bit. So we're now sort of similar to the peak figures that we were seeing around 2022. The numbers are really unpredictable, though. It's very difficult to know, what the next few months will look like.
There could be over 50,000, some are saying. Can I ask you who's to blame for this? We've heard from Keir Starmer calling them Farage boats. We heard a similar response in other interviews with other members of his team. They clearly think they can pin the small boats crisis on Brexit, on that choice supported by Nigel Farage and other mainly Conservative MPs to leave the European Union. Is that fair to blame Brexit for the small boats crisis?
I think that's a pretty large overstatement. I think there is some evidence that there are some people in Europe who, asylum seekers who are crossing the Channel in northern France, who in some cases have already been refused asylum in Europe. And they tell researchers, and there have been some research projects, they've told people that because the UK is no longer in the European Union, they feel that they can come over to the UK. And the UK doesn't now know that they've got that past asylum application in Europe, and so they'll get a new decision. So there is some evidence of that. But there's a lot of other stuff that's been going on that's led to those higher numbers. We've seen a professionalisation, for example, of the smuggling outfits in northern France. making it sort of much easier for people to get across. So I think, we don't know how big the impact of Brexit is. I would be surprised if it was responsible for most of that increase. I think there's a lot of other stuff going on that has led to those numbers going up.
If you were putting a percentage on it, would it be 10%, 15, 20?
I wish I could answer that question. It's really hard. I mean, qualitative interviews, which don't give us statistics, but show that there are substantial numbers of people who cite this as a reason, but it's certainly not the only reason. But I would imagine probably a minority, but we really just don't have the evidence, unfortunately.
And the critics say, of course, that means we're not part of this Dublin Convention, so we can't return individuals to the country where they first may have claimed asylum. Have critics got a point about that? And that's maybe why they say, they talk about Brexit, because of this issue that the levers aren't there anymore in our government now, we're outside the European Union.
Yeah, so there are two issues here. One is, can the UK return people to France or Italy or Greece or wherever they arrived? Now, the reality is that even when we were with the European Union, even though in theory the UK had the ability to do that, in practice it was actually quite unusual. We were looking maybe a few hundred, possibly 1,000 people per year. So the majority of people were never returned through that system. The bit that I think is potentially a bit more interesting is the sharing of the data. The fact that the UK no longer knows who has claimed asylum in Europe, and that data sharing system wasn't perfect before Brexit either. But there are probably some people who, if we had the data sharing in place still, the UK might not even need to adjudicate the asylum claim, because they could say, oh, well, we see that you've already had a claim refused in France, so we don't need to adjudicate that here. And they could either go straight into the appeal system or into a return system, which again, as well, is something that has been a real challenge for decades now, the returns part of the picture.
And the approach of the government is to try and find agreement, isn't it, with other countries to take more individuals back. But we have given hundreds of millions of our money, of taxpayers' money to France for very little return. Are people right to be frustrated with the French attitude to this?
I think one of the things that is very tricky for the government in the UK is that we have a lot of discussion about sovereignty and enforcing the border, but actually we are very dependent on other countries. And that this is the case around the world. You look at the United States, incredibly dependent on Mexico, and has actually been able to secure Mexico's cooperation on this issue. And so I think the France effectively, perhaps quite reasonably, doesn't really see this as their problem. It's not as high a political priority in France as it is here. So I think in theory, we know that if the UK were able to persuade France to accept back a large majority of the people who crossed in small boats, it would have a dramatic impact on that route, and it would make it much less likely that people would attempt it. In practice, France, for whatever reason, has not seen it as a priority to do that.
And that's making it a priority. We heard, didn't we? I was following the speech, of course, given by the French president earlier this year, and he talked about the pressure put on the services in northern France. I think he said that for every euro it costs the UK, it's costing them €3 in northern France just dealing with the crisis. So it's trying to work out how they can make the French wake up and deal with it properly and stop a land across. But maybe they feel the problem isn't theirs anymore when they cross.
I mean, France is frustrated by the situation, as you say. It's especially in northern France. There are people who are grouping in those areas. There's resources of the French police, which of course the UK is contributing to. So it's not that they don't care about this at all. I think they would like to see it end. It's just that it's also complicated on our side and less on their side and less of a priority, I think.
Well, yes, I'm looking at the figures here on interceptions, down to 38% 2025, 45% last year. They're not going as fast as they could. I mean, this one-in, one-out scheme, we've got maybe, I think, fewer than 50 have been sent back to France under the one-in, one-out scheme. Of course, we can take one off because one came back last week, as we know, the hokey-cokey migrant, as we're calling him. Is it a gimmick? One in, one out? Will it eventually work when they've cleared the backlog in the hotels?
Well, I think if you continued along at the numbers that we're seeing currently, so less than 1% of people crossing being returned, then this would be no more than really a symbolic effort. I think in some ways the situation here is actually a little bit similar with the situation that we had when we were looking a couple of years ago at the Conservatives' Rwanda policy, which is that if you just send a handful of people, it's not really going to make any difference to people's decision making when they're thinking about crossing. If you were able to get to a position where a large share of people were being sent, in that case to Rwanda, or in this case now to France, then it would make a big difference. But the challenge is
it's not happening, is it?
Capacity in place to do that.
I think, to be fair to the Tories, that the low numbers, 2 or 3%, was a proof of concept to show a judge that Rwanda was safe. Similarly, I think we're still at the proof of concept stage with a 1 in, 1 out, but they've got to ramp it up quickly to show, to deter people from making these crossings.
Yes, so I mean the government here will be very keen to to get to France to accept more people. It's reported that they're also looking at deals with other EU countries and then possible deals with countries just outside of the EU. But yeah, at the end of the day, it will depend on numbers, and that's the big uncertainty and the big challenge, I think.
Can I ask you about the digital ID scheme? Now, when it was launched, I was there when it was launched by Sir Keir Starmer at a kind of progressive conference here in Westminster. It was billed then as an attempt to cut down on working in the so-called black economy, the illegal economy. And then it was widened to be a way of protecting your own ID, and then a further widening to say it's a way of acting, of accessing government services. And now we've seen since late last week a huge amount of advertising online about this, really stressing it's a bit like internet banking, apparently. I mean, what on earth is going on here? Is this the magic bullet, as it were, to try and deal with illegal working, or is it bigger than that? And should we be worried about it from a civil liberties point of view?
It's a very good question. Interestingly, we've just been talking about France. France have a firm belief that the digital ID or some kind of ID card system would help crack down on illegal working. I don't personally see my employers are already required to check whether people have the right to work when they're offering them a job, and the same employers who turn a blind eye to people's status currently would presumably do so under a digital ID system. I think really the digital ID system, it may be around the margins. If you had a very intrusive system where every British person was required to use the ID to do absolutely anything in day-to-day life, private sector transactions, all of that kind of stuff that you do actually see in some European countries, then it might have some impact around the margins on people who are here illegally. But I think really the decision about whether to have a digital ID, because it won't necessarily make a big difference on unauthorised migration, I think that decision should be made on its merits. But, is this something British people want? Do they want it in order to access public services and so forth? Is that going to make things more efficient, or actually does people see it as an intrusion that they don't want in their lives? And that really is probably what should drive the decision rather than the immigration side.
Yeah, you don't see it as being a big deal for the dealing with illegal working in this country?
Not really. Maybe some impact around the margins, but I don't think it's a game changer at all.
This is a mad assumption. It's been great to see you this morning on Camilla Tominey's show, Director of the Migration Observatory at Oxford University. Really appreciate your time this morning. Thank you. Now, back to our top story on the Epping manhunt. Another update this morning, this time from the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer. He has said this moments ago: Hadush Kubatu has been arrested and will be deported. Officers have worked quickly and diligently to bring him back into custody. We have ordered an investigation to establish what went wrong. We must make sure this doesn't happen again. And this from the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood. She says, I would like to thank the Met, Essex and British Transport Police for their tireless work around the clock to hunt down and arrest Hadush Kubatu. He'll be deported as quickly as possible. With me now in the studio at Westminster is the chief political correspondent of The Times, Aubrey Allegretti. Is this enough? I haven't heard an apology from these politicians yet. There are 3 of them on so far. Wes is on the show. We've heard now from the Prime Minister. He's in charge of the country, of course, and also Shabana Mahmood. No one's saying sorry to the victims or the wider public.
No, absolutely. I mean, the government certainly will come under scrutiny. Parliament is in session tomorrow. I'm sure there'll be statements, urgent questions, ministers being dragged to the House to effectively explain what went wrong. Even if this isn't in their direct control, there are at least 2 sort of Home Office services which have questions to answer here. First of all, the prison service, which decided to let him go in the first place, and possibly the immigration enforcement services, which were basically supposed to be picking him up, it seems, and potentially deporting or removing him. I'm sure the government will be putting him on a plane as fast as humanly possible.
Yes.
But still, they're going to come under a lot of criticism for this.
I mean, it is true, isn't it, that it was the public what got him. It wasn't the police, so they're being thanked, of course, for their hard work in trying to find him, but it was the public who stepped in to do the work of the government. That's not great in a manhunt.
No, I mean, in the social media age, it seems that actually we've been effectively relying on these videos that have been taken of him that appeared in Chelmsford town centre and from other people who've sort of seen glimpses of him. It's amazing that in, this sort of CCTV-riddled, capital hotspot, that it almost took 48 hours to track him down. So I suspect that, ministers will be asking, did the police do everything they could to find him?
Looking at these two statements dropped in the past 5 minutes, no one's being thanked here outside of the police, who obviously did get to him when called by the. But the public did this.
Absolutely.
It wasn't anybody. Joe Public caught this guy and then called the police. They weren't doing it. Of course, they were trying to find him, of course, behind the scenes.
Yeah, of course. I think Wes Streeting sort of alluded to it in his answer to you when he was on earlier. He was saying, we are very grateful for members of the public for sort of trying to stay on their toes, tip the police off.
Yeah.
And, that's how he's been tracked down this morning in North London. But, of course, he's managed to get from Essex into London, from Stratford, it seems, from a different part of East London to Finsbury Park, which is sort of northwest London. And it seems as though all of that trail has taken some time. He could have, if he'd wanted to, potentially, stayed under the radar much longer. He was still wearing his prison clothes when we saw him last, so he's not making an attempt to disguise or hide himself, actually. This guy was almost sort of asking...
Well, he tried not to escape. I mean, he tried to walk back into the prison. I'm troubled by these figures. There's 262 prisoners mistakenly released by the prison system in the year to 2025 March, 120% increase. I know we're busy as journalists, Aubrey, but that had gone below my radar and it shouldn't have done. There'll be a lot more focus now going forward on this, won't there?
Certainly, and I mean, when you break down those figures, it's about 230, 240 who are wrongly arrested from prisons, but about 30 of those are people who are wrongly released, at court services. So there are people sort of walking free from the dock, it would seem. And, this is a government which would say we inherited a really difficult sort of problem with our prisons, but ultimately Labour's had 15 months in charge now. They can't build new prisons. No one is expecting that. But, you've got to stop making these basic mistakes. That's what people expect.
Is it linked to the millions arriving here legally, migrants, the illegal, tens of thousands of illegal ones, and the system can't cope anymore? Just too many. The system isn't really equipped to deal with the ballooning population in the economy fuelled by illegal and legal migration.
Well, I mean, when you look at Chelmsford Prison, that had a sort of a history, a record of being judged not sufficiently good for a series of tasks, basically, that they were judged on by the inspectorate, which included preparation for release. So I'm sure when we were speaking to the sort of former retired detective earlier, he was saying you've got a problem in prisons where effectively the staff have low morale, they don't feel like they're being well paid, there's lots of churn, which means that there's not much of institutional knowledge, experience and memory. And you don't have people who are sort of working there for decades who know it inside out, and therefore maybe mistakes like these do happen more often.
It's a great... I mean, where we go to tomorrow, I mean, should heads roll? Should we see... no one ever seems to get fired from anything, as far as I can make out in public life. I'm probably sure I'm wrong in saying that, apart from the election, when the electorate have their say. Will heads roll over this? Because it seems a complete disaster.
Yes, well, the phrase in politics is deputy heads will roll.
Not even that sometimes, Aubrey.
No, exactly. I mean, in this case, I think the prison service confirmed on Saturday that a sort of serving member of staff had been suspended from duties while this was being carried out. But certainly there will be, it's an investigation, but is it going to be a black box that takes, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months before we get the answers and accountability? Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister's promised transparency, but I think people also want to see pace. They want things happening soon. So is this investigation going to be over, within any meaningful period of time before basically it gets battered into the long grass and people
Great
stop paying
questions,
attention?
Aubrey Agretti. We'll see all the answers in the Times tomorrow when you're on the case again for the Times. Thank you for joining us on the Camilla Tominey Show. Now let's get the latest updates on the breaking news. The migrant from Epping, the Epping migrant who was released in error from HMP Chelmsford on Friday morning, has been arrested, has been detained. Let's go back to New Scotland Yard now, where our reporter Will Godley has the latest. Will.
Yeah, Chris, 2 hours and 15 minutes since that arrest in Finsbury Park earlier this morning, thanks to a tip-off from members of the public. And I've seen some photographs of that arrest. I can tell you that it looks like it was non-uniform police officers who apprehended Hadush Kabatu walking on a pavement down towards Finsbury Park, outside the actual park itself. Of course, that's also the name of the area in London, but it looks like it was near a bus stop outside the park. And I can also tell you that he was wearing a different different outfit to those earlier images we'd seen him in those grey tracksuits. We'd seen him in the prison tracksuits with an avocado bag. Well, when he was arrested earlier this morning, I can tell you he was wearing blue jeans, a black puffer coat and a hoodie, which he had the hood up over his head, whether that's trying to conceal his identity or not. But in the images I've seen, he was being taken away by those 3 non-uniform police officers to their car. And that was obviously happening this morning after a member of the public tipped them off that they'd seen him in the area, and the Metropolitan Police thanking the public for their help in this investigation. And James Conway, who's overseen this investigation, said it's been diligent and fast-paced, and also thanked the specialist officers not only in the Met but in Essex Police and the British Transport Police as well for their cooperation in this manhunt lasting 45 hours, but coming to an end this morning. We've had lots of reaction as well from the government as well. Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer saying that he will be deported, and he's also saying in his statement officers have worked quickly and diligently to bring him back into custody, and that he has ordered an investigation to establish what went wrong. He said we must make sure this does not happen again. Well, David Lammy, the Justice Secretary, issuing a similar statement, but he's also talking about the fact that he's ordered this immediate strengthening of release checks and a full investigation into what went wrong. The Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, saying that Hadush Kabatu will be deported as soon as possible. Well, I've had a look on Skyscanner. I can tell you the next flight to Ethiopia leaves tonight at 8:15 this evening, arrives there 7 o'clock in the morning local time. No word from the government if he'll, of course, be on that flight. We do know from the police he's not being handed over to the Home Office, deportation officers. He's being handed back to the prison service, who will then keep him in custody. And this whole process will then happen again, where they release him to the Home Office deportation officers. Let's hope they don't accidentally release him to the public again. That would be an absolutely terrible mistake if that was to happen twice. Of course, that investigation ordered by the Justice Secretary, David Lammy, to establish exactly how this happened. We know that we've heard from an eyewitness who's been speaking to reporters saying that Kabatu was very confused outside of the prison, wondering exactly what he was supposed to do when he was released. Very, very confused, not knowing what had happened. Well, this investigation seeks to get to the bottom of that, and Wes Streeton was talking about that on GBNews earlier on.
Well, what a relief, and I just want to say a massive thank you to members of the public whose vigilance provided the police with vital intelligence that allowed him to be tracked down to Newbury Park, where he's been arrested and detained and will now be deported. But as you've just been discussing, this is an unbelievable turn of events and should never have happened. And many of us are asking ourselves this morning, how on earth could someone who has been convicted of a serious crime, who was due for deportation, instead be released onto our streets?
Well, Chris, many people feeling similar sentiments to Wes Streeting. How on earth was he allowed out? Feeling very relieved that after 45 hours he is back in custody.
That's right, Wes Streeting channeling the Yangan. All eyes on the 8:15 flight to Ethiopia tonight. Will he be on it? We'll wait and see. Will Godley, thank you for joining us live from Scotland Yard. Great to see you. And thank you to all my guests on an extremely busy morning on the Camilla Tominey Show. I've loved presenting it. I hope you've enjoyed watching it. And up next on GB News is Sunday with Michael Portillo. Michael, before I ask you what's on your show, do you think this government can't govern anymore?
It looks as though we're seeing public services sort of bleeding to death in front of us. And ministers need to be careful what they say. They're promising that this man will be deported. Well, let's see. They're saying it must never happen. They're saying it must never happen again. It's happened 260 times. So when did they decide that it was never going to happen again?
Is it getting harder? They're trying to govern in an era of 24-hour news. That wasn't there when you were in power in the 90s.
No. This has nothing to do with 24-hour news. It's down to basic competence. I mean, it's only, of course, because of a freedom of information move that we've learned that there were 260 cases of people being released improperly. And that's before we get to, you know, the overall situation with the boats, which I think is that since the one-in, one-out policy was introduced, we've had 10,000 more people arrive by boat. I think we've had 42 sent back. We've received about 23 or 25, and of course we don't know how many of those we deported have taken the next boat service, which runs very regularly.
And just very quickly, who's on your show, Michael?
Well, obviously we're going to keep you up to date with that story. We're talking about how the whips operate in Parliament. I used to be one, so we'll see whether the author has got to the bottom of it. Why are ministers tussling with victims of rape gangs in public? I'll be asking my panel, and I will be sampling some delicious food as well.
That sounds extremely delicious. I'll be watching closely. And thank you, Michael Portillo. And thank you to all my guests today. I've really enjoyed sitting in for my friend Camilla Tominey. Thanks to you for watching at home. I hope Camilla Tominey enjoys her holiday wherever she is in the world. She's back next week. Up next on GB News, it's that man there, Michael Portillo. But first, here's your time for the weather.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Boxed Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Hello, here's your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. We'll see outbreaks of rain spilling their way southeastwards across the UK for the rest of the afternoon, accompanied by quite a chilly breeze. It's this area of low pressure centred towards the northwest of the UK that will spill its way southeastwards. Its weather fronts bring outbreaks of rain southeastwards into many areas, accompanied by quite brisk winds, those tightly packed isobars indicating quite blustery conditions out and about. So as into the afternoon then, those outbreaks of rain gradually slip their way southeastwards across Scotland, reaching northern England and parts of Wales by the end of the afternoon. Meanwhile, we'll hold on to some bright spells for a time at least towards the far south and southeast, and turning more showery in nature, that rain as we go into the early evening across the northwest of the UK. Quite a chilly afternoon to come, temperatures no better than 11 or 12 Celsius, add on the effect of the breeze and feeling colder out and about as well. So as we head into the early part of the evening, another band of showery rain starts to push its way south into northern parts of Scotland. Quite heavy rain in places here, quite blustery winds as well. The showers a bit more scattered across Northern Ireland into parts of northern England, and then heading further south into southern England and southern parts of Wales, we hold on to some persistent rain from the afternoon here, so quite a soggy end to Sunday afternoon. As we go through the rest of the evening into the overnight period, those outbreaks of rain across the south and southwest tend to push away, so we'll start to see some clearer spells developing across England and Wales into the overnight period. Meanwhile, that band of heavy showery rain across Scotland pushes its way south into Northern Ireland, into northern England as well, again accompanied by blustery winds in places, with some cold air pushing in across the north of Scotland, giving a touch of frost by Monday morning. But temperatures hold up in the south, so a slightly milder start to Monday here. As for Monday itself, well, it's a case of sunshine and showers across the UK. One or two of the showers, certainly during the morning, quite heavy and blustery, but they start to ease as we head into the afternoon, but notice some more persistent rain starting to edge back into Northern Ireland from the west by the end of the afternoon. Temperatures once again pretty disappointing for the time of year, but not quite as blustery as on Sunday. Highs 14 in the south, 8 or 9 degrees towards the north of the UK.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Boxed Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
It's the final week to see how you can become our biggest winner this year. First, you could be driving away with this brand new Benamar Primera motorhome. This luxury vehicle comfortably sleeps 4, has its own fitted kitchen and bathroom areas, and comes complete with fitted awning and bicycle rack. And that's not all, as we'll also give you a whopping £30,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. For another chance to win, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB16 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 31st of October. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints. How many fingers have I got up?
About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning and welcome to Sunday with Michael Portillo. On this final Sunday of the month, let us remind ourselves of L.M. Montgomery's character Anne Shirley, who exclaims, "I'm so glad I live in a world where there are Octobers." I bid you welcome to 2 hours of arts, culture, current affairs and politics this Sunday morning. The sex offender migrant who was mistakenly released from prison has been arrested in the Finsbury Park area of London this morning. We'll be bringing you updates on that throughout the show, and Will Godley is at New Scotland Yard in London.
Yeah, after 45 hours, Kabatu is back in police custody and will be returned to the prison service. The Home Secretary says he'll be deported as soon as possible.
The by-election for a seat in the Welsh Senate in Caerphilly produced a significant result. But what did it mean? Did it mean that the Labour government is doomed, or that the supporters of the left, combining and voting tactically, can defeat reform? I'll ask my panel. This week, the government's partial returns deal with France came unstuck, as one of the very few migrants returned to France promptly made his way back to England. The number of small boat migrants who've crossed the Channel this year surpassed the total for the whole of last year. The former director of UK Border